Hi, welcome to our presentation, Vocational Rehabilitation and Schools, Collaboration for Improved Transition Outcomes. My name is Hannah Ramsey. I am a post-secondary transition associate at VCU's Center on Transition Innovations. Today, we are lucky to have some amazing content experts joining us to share about their experiences collaborating in interagency teams, providing transition services to students with disabilities. First, we have Tyler Schreffler, who is a unit supervisor in the Fairfax office of the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, or DARS. DARS is Virginia's state rehabilitation agency. And also joining us from DARS, we have Julie Paradiso, who is a vocational rehabilitation counselor serving Falls Church, Virginia. And last but not least, we have Liz McCarthy, who is joining us from Falls Church City Public Schools. Liz is the transition coordinator for Meridian High School in Falls Church, Virginia. Liz and Julie partnered to provide quality transition services, and they will be sharing their best practices and effective collaboration with us today. But first, I want to give you a brief overview of VCU Center on Transition Innovations, or CTI. We were established in 2013 and are funded by the Virginia Department of Education. CTI serves as a think tank and a portal of transition resources for students, educators, family, service providers, and other stakeholders as partners in the transition process. We develop and house training materials such as free courses, publications, videos, and webcasts just like this one. We are also in the field providing services and conducting research through our demonstration projects like Discovering Me and Project Search. These are just some of our resources and demonstration projects. More information can be found on our website, centerontransition.org. In today's webcast, we'll be covering the important topic of pre-employment transition services, or Pre-ETS. We'll also talk about how schools and vocational rehabilitation staff can effectively collaborate to provide those Pre-ETS services. And lastly, we'll talk about those best practices for service delivery and supporting successful transition services. To start us off, Liz is going to be sharing some information about IDEA and the school's role in transition planning. Then we'll hear from Tyler Schreffler from DARS about VR's role in the transition process. And then Liz and Julie will share how they bring both the school and VR perspectives and resources to the table in their day-to-day service provision.
Hi. Transition planning at the school level should begin at an early age. In the state of Virginia, it is age 14 or 8th grade, whatever comes first. It is a team approach, and that is important to remember: the student's voice, parent's voice, case manager, other related services, to really get a true feel for the student's strengths, weaknesses, and where they would like to go after high school. The overall goal is to prepare the students for after high school. So keeping the end in mind, making sure that you address the areas of education, employment, training, and independent living skills, to see where the student, the family, the school would like to see the student hold success in a post-secondary environment, and then planning backwards for where the school can prepare the student in those areas. It's also important in these beginning conversations to understand that it's very individualized and that these plans are fluid each year, starting at age 14 to 18 or 22 when the student exits. Many things can change. Many skills can be gained. Students can have more focus on where they want to be. So having a fluid conversation with the entire team is important. And also identifying where outside agencies will come to play, where we can provide services as a school, but yet where schools may not be able to reach different skills, and what agencies we need to work with in order to ensure those skills are provided. We also like to plan for needed assessments, and so that students each year are assessed on their skills and where some weaknesses may lie, so that we have accurate information on where we need to provide services. So for examples of where transition services can be addressed at school, for employment, we can start with, like I mentioned, the interest and strength inventories. These can be a part of standardized or informal assessments. We also like to give student exposure. The student may not know that certain jobs are out there, so we really focus on exposure with community-based instruction. So for example, we'll take students to an apartment complex to understand different jobs that can be involved at one location. Taking students to a medical facility, you have maintenance, you have custodial, you have culinary, you have hospitality. So exposing students to different environments where they can see how different jobs play into the daily interaction. We also work with students in small groups at the school to do job readiness skills, such as interview skills, resume development. We also allow and try and build students' time into students' schedule so that they can have some school-based employment. So for example, a mail delivery route, a school coffee shop, having students help with the athletic department, many different skills that can be generalized within their school day without taking time out of their academic schedule. We also have students who have time within their schedule go out into the community and have internships. We place students in restaurants, retail, libraries. Like I said before, we look at placements where students may have exposure to one or more jobs for a certain amount of time to gain those employment skills. For transition for post-secondary education, there's a lot of collaboration with our college and career counselor to make sure that students who are looking at 2 or 4 year schools have the support that they need. We have information sessions with our 4 year schools in the area to let parents and students identify what are the differences between high school and college so that students can be prepared to meet those requirements as an adult. We also work with the community college, Northern Virginia Community College. We have community campus visits. We also have information sessions, at least 6 throughout the year, so students are prepared to take on that post-secondary educational role. We also have a vocational career center here near us that we place students who can take advantage of vocational CTE classes during the day, but also have different opportunities to take dual enrollment for community college credit at those classes, for those classes as well. So overall, we really are able to encompass all the areas of transition planning, including we have our students also in their day for daily living travel training. We work at the students who are at internships, take public transportation when able, and then also working in our school kitchens to help prepare meals for teachers and to get kitchen safety skills that they would need for independent living. And where the school may have some additional need for support through agencies, that's when we look to Department of Aging and Rehab Services to begin to fill those gaps to where the school may need some support for students for additional skills. And where the school may need some additional support, we look to outside agencies such as Department of Aging and Rehab Services to help support our students, to help prepare them for post high school and adult living. And so Tyler now will explain services that can be provided through DARS.
Thanks, Liz. DARS stands for the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, and as Virginia's vocational rehabilitation program, we provide services to support individuals with disabilities and individuals who are aging adults. Our focus is on providing services to promote independence, inclusion, and integration into the community. Specifically, the Division of Rehabilitative Services is focusing on supporting individuals with disabilities to prepare for, secure, and retain employment. The Division of Rehabilitative Services ensures that individuals with disabilities have opportunities to compete and enjoy high quality employment. And we do that by collaborating with individuals and community partners such as the schools in order to maximize employment opportunities and work towards economic self-sufficiency and independence. Each state across the country has their own vocational rehabilitation program that provides similar services. Today, we're here to talk a little bit about pre-employment transition services, specifically, or Pre-ETS. Pre-ETS came about after the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act was passed. These services prepare students with disabilities for work starting at an earlier age. Students with disabilities are considered to be between the ages of 14 through 21 or 22, depending on their birthday. And they can be provided in the school, community, or office. The objective of pre-employment transition services is to supplement services that are already being provided by the school. So again, we're here to collaborate, identify gaps in services, and help to fill the void of services that aren't being filled in other areas. There are 5 core pre-employment transition services, which include job exploration counseling, workplace readiness training, counseling on post-secondary education and training, work-based learning experiences, and instruction and self-advocacy. You'll hear a little bit later about how these services are being provided both in the school and by DARS professionals, in addition to some of our vendor services. Next, Julie will talk a little bit about the continuum of services and where pre-employment transition services fit on that spectrum.
Thanks, Tyler. When we're working in the field with our community partners and our schools, we find that early intervention is so important. The sooner we get the students thinking about life outside of the school, the more readily they will be able to make those informed decisions about their own goals. Prior to eligibility, which is something we do when someone's seeking vocational rehab services, we can work quickly with students and begin to serve them under this Pre-ETS model. So pre-employment transition services are just the beginning of that continuum of services, from early intervention, working with the school, to vocational rehabilitation. Pre-ETS was designed as an early intervention for students with disabilities, even those who might not meet the criteria for those later vocational rehab services. The VR counselor works to educate the students and the family and the educational staff on relevant VR services when we partner with them in the schools, so that they can also help determine what types of services are going to be beneficial for this student to set and meet their own goals.
So now we've heard a little bit from Liz about the school's role, and we've heard from Tyler and Julie about the Vocational Rehabilitation Agency's role in serving students in their transition from high school. So we just wanted to stop for a minute and bring it all together through the different laws that govern the transition process. Liz, you want to start us off?
So even with the best transition plans, successful collaboration of schools and agencies and programs is needed for students who may otherwise fall through the cracks, whose parents may not be so vocal about post-secondary plans, or students who may not have a clear idea or not necessarily demonstrate different strengths or weaknesses. So it is very important for everyone to work together and understand what resources and programs are available, so students can begin to formulate successful plans that include a plan A, a plan B, a plan C.
And when VR is introduced into the school system, often through informational like seminars for parents or students, we find that we've been able to identify students who maybe haven't been on the ETR's radar, or maybe some of the things that they need haven't come up in a school setting. So that's where that partnership goes both ways. Through WIOA and VR, we're required to provide direct service to youth with disabilities So anyone who has an IEP or a 504 plan, those 4 core services for work preparation, those pre-ETS services. But VR is a little different than what the school can do because VR emphasizes competitive employment. And not all students that have an IEP or 504 plan are ready for competitive employment or a good candidate for future competitive employment. So we do active outreach and early identification to support the needs of those students that maybe the ETR has identified or that we might identify for the ETR when someone reaches out to us after an information session.
Thank you for both sharing your roles in transition. Even though we have IDEA governing school transition and WIOAs governing what VR brings to the table, both of these agencies seek to align and connect a shared vision for these transition services. Of course, we're all working for better outcomes for students with disabilities, and both of these laws require collaboration, which is what we're all about, especially today.
So how do schools begin this successful collaboration? One of the most important ways that successful collaboration begins is student identification. So for example, specifically at the beginning of the year, I share a Google Doc with all of the case managers because there is only one of me. And I know that many ETRs are in the same position, that they have many caseloads or different schools. And you can't get to know all of the students on that individualized level right at age 14, or if they're even still in 8th grade in middle school and not physically in the high school building. So I share a Google Doc where case managers may put in where different students will need transition support. And that has changed throughout the year. And as I meet students, I work with that to then understand what students then will be referred for what services, whether pre-ETS, or if it's someone who needs to work more closely with a college and career counselor. And also from that list, I start to begin parent outreach. Because I know Julie's time is very valuable, a lot of time disseminating the information about different services for students can take more of her time to work individually with the student and the families. So having different information sessions, or when I am at IEPs, making sure that time is spent introducing different services that may come for that student in their transition plan. Completing the referral forms. I know that paperwork is very sometimes time consuming for all of us to complete, but making sure that all that information is on that referral form before I hand it off is very valuable. For example, a student email is sometimes hard to get, or sometimes students don't have their own personal email. I know for our district, students are not allowed to get emails to their school email from outside agencies. So making sure that a school, that a student has an own personal email or email of a parent that can receive that communication. And also making sure that the students, I understand where the student wants to be, and the parent. We need to make sure, and I can do a little bit of kind of that initial discussion where are we looking at competitive employment right after high school? Are we looking at furthering education or training to better get an idea of when VR or DARS services pre-ETS would be best introduced for that student? And also just the physical meeting space. It's good to know that if Julie's coming in to meet with students, she has that space to really to have those intakes and to have those discussions with the students.
Yeah, and absolutely everything that Liz mentioned there and everything that she does really is crucial in this partnership being effective. I try to do my part so that she can do those things, like leaving packets of information, sending her upcoming events and flyers to disseminate through those school email addresses, like giving her the documentation that she might be able to use or show about DARS at an IEP meeting, or to kind of gather an idea of how much interest there is, and then set up an informational session for me so I can come and have the maximum amount of participants that are going to want to learn about DARS. I've never done an informational session where there's 1 or 2 people there, because she does a great job of getting that information about DARS into the hands, and then we can take over from there. I think that, what VR brings to the table that sometimes the school may have some difficulty accessing is these very specific and intentional vendor relationships that we have cultivated with local employment service organizations to provide enrichment opportunities for the students. One of the beautiful things about the partnership with Liz's school is that those schedules are paid very close attention to, the student schedules and the free blocks. And we're able to actually bring a vendor into the school to give an enrichment class that prepares students, does work readiness, self-advocacy, teaches them about the career exploration and the pathways to the careers they're interested in. DARS can also step in and sometimes develop those parent and student relationships that might be slightly different than the way the parent navigates a school system. So sometimes information will come out when that parent is talking to DARS where a need that the student has wasn't made aware to the school. So just having another person, another agency that come in and be a support and know that there's going to be support moving forward. We have business connections in the community, so we can help with those summer jobs and those work experiences for students who are struggling to get some work under their belt so they can really understand their place in the world of work and what they're interested in. And we help with those transition plans with the end goal in mind of either that career exploration, or if they have a pretty good idea of what they'd like to study or learn for their future career, how to get them there. We have access to maybe some other training options than the traditional community college or four-year university. So when working with Liz, we're able to fine tune our procedures. She's very flexible. And because of that, we can meet the needs of the students of her specific school in a way that, maybe a different school, we don't have that same access. We help navigate things like, do the parents have to take leave to be in these meetings, or can they video in? I think when we're leveraging our partnerships, it's very important to acknowledge the limitation of both organizations. So with the school, sometimes they'll have difficulties with access to the enrichment activities or the manpower to provide them. DARS sometimes is limited in their access to students, and students are busy. School's a full-time job. They may have extracurriculars. So figuring out how to meet them when and where, so that time constraint is not the barrier to accessible service. Lastly, VR can provide some things that the school just doesn't have access to. We, in our area, sometimes we're able to provide an assessment, a neuropsychological assessment, or vocational evaluations that are at a different level than the student would get at school. More assistance with work readiness, transferable skill development, and those specialized opportunities geared towards helping the students develop their idea about what type of career path is going to be realistic and sustainable and something that they want to do. So what works? There's lots of different ways to make this happen. I think Liz and I find that communication, organization, consistency, and coordination are key. But each partnership is different. As a VR counselor, you need to be open to what that school needs from you. You have to be flexible and sometimes think of the delivery of service quite differently than you would VR service. You're working with a different population than you are in an adult office, and you have to make the most of the opportunities. And I think for myself, I have to understand that sometimes things that look like they're not working are actually working and may bear fruit a little bit later on. You have to be persistent. We have structure, we have deadlines, we have requirements, but I try to put less expectation on the structure and more on the interaction. Is the student getting valuable information and enrichment that they couldn't get somewhere else? Are they engaged? Are they excited? I guess my main requirement is to really just meet them where they are. So developing that great working relationship looks different in a school than it does in a traditional VR setting. And I think for Liz and I, making sure that we've clarified our roles and our responsibilities so that we're not duplicating services, but we're enhancing what each other can give. And Liz makes it so great because she gives me space in her school for those information nights, for the scheduling times to be clear. A school schedule is really complicated, and we have A days and B days and return blocks and all of these things that are hard for someone who's not in that system to navigate. She also bears a great responsibility in that documentation gathering and record gathering. So when I'm given a referral from her, I have what I need to get started, and I can work on building the relationship instead of tracking down documents.
Well, and I think we always say that, we have creative collaboration because we fine-tuned how we share our information, which is great because that information and that referral process can, be the red tape that you get stuck in, and that's not where we want our students to be. So even fine-tuning how we're getting different information from the student, and the constant communication of, okay, we have this on this student, but a parent maybe couldn't stay for the entire intake meeting. So knowing that Julie needed this piece of information, I, went to the parent's place of work and was able to get the needed signatures because Julie had sent me that paperwork saying it needed to be signed. Or even we're talking about students who may need different supports that Julie is trying to find a vendor or a different job placement, thinking, well, how can we as the school support that? And maybe there's a school job or something that we can start with the student while Julie is doing her legwork to be able to find something for that student through DARS. I think it's also important for the school when we talk about successful collaboration of an outside agency is to keep your administration also informed at all times. Making sure that the admin sees the glows and grows of your working relationship to know what you're doing with this outside agency helps so that nothing can, like red tape gets in the way as far as being able to provide these services within the school day. So that is another way that open communication, because I know ETRs a lot of times need to work a little bit more at those relationships with the administration because they may not be at one school at all times. They may have at multiple schools. So making sure that you're doing your due diligence to have the administration understand what great work and what services you're providing those students through this collaboration process. Also with the school information nights, trying to disseminate the information as much so that Julie's time is well spent. Making sure that when we have a parent coffee or an information night, even having those two different times, I know can be a lot of work, but the more parents that you can reach and students that you can reach to get that information out makes the information gathering, the student identification so much easier because people are kind of already on the same page with knowing what services will be offered.
And it helps tremendously with the buy-in. People are excited when they get the information in a way that they can, understand it and ask questions. The engagement with the students and the parents is much better.
So really looking at this continuum of services, we've talked a lot in detail about how it starts, but this slide gives a wonderful visualization of kind of where it starts and how. So really having the school start doing the legwork of understanding, identifying the students and disseminating the information. And then it kind of can be a seamless handoff to then work together with the VR counselor for the student intakes and identifying services.
Right. And then, when all that has been completed, that allows me to kind of step in, Liz and I do a lot of staffing on student needs, where they're at the school, what things she's noticing in the school day or other teachers, places where we can kind of put those growth opportunities for them, working hard with the family so that they understand that, you know, especially if it's a senior and they're getting ready to exit the system, that all this great support that the school has provided over the years is ending, but they still have somebody in their court, someone that, you know, can be working with them as they transition out of the school. And then really working on pushing into all of that student free time so that you're not taking from those other things that are helping those students gain independence, those after school activities, that participation in family activities, you know, just really collaborating so that we can do pieces at the school, on breaks, summer, and then, you know, as needed in the evenings or, you know, times when the student is not in school, but just maximizing that student free time in the school so that they're getting all of those enrichment opportunities there. You know, one of the best parts of this collaboration with Liz at her school is that she really makes time for VR and for DARS to happen at the school. We have dedicated days each month where I spend the day at that school. We staff cases, I meet with the students on my caseload, and I do intakes for new students.
Thank you so much, Liz and Julie, for sharing some of your best practices and what works for you guys. Now, Liz and Julie are going to share some examples of some great transition outcomes for specific students that they've had over the years.
Thanks, Hannah. Our first student example is a student who was a applied studies candidate. The student exited at age 22, but started with DARS through Pre-ETS services. And the student worked and also took classes at our local vocational center in culinary, and really had a lot of opportunities to fine-tune culinary skills within those CTE classes. But beginning with Pre-ETS, Julie worked with the student to make cheat sheets for applications. The student participated in Virtual Job Shadow Month. The student also did a training at the Woodrow Wilson facility through DARS services. We worked with the student at the school level in order to make sure that other opportunities for gaining experience within culinary and also in any different type of generalized job skill was able to take place within the student's day. And the student did stay with us till 22 and did end up accessing VR services. And the student is now employed at an Ability One position at Quantico. And he's doing wonderfully. And it really is a wonderful kind of sign of how a student started taking advantage of all the services at the school, but then where Julie stepped in with Pre-ETS, and then the student was identified as needing more support with VR, did those VR experiences, and is now working in a very competitive employment situation that was set up through his DARS services. I'll let Julie talk about our next example.
Thanks, Liz. Each of these examples has a very different path and a very different end result, but all successful. This particular student was identified by Liz in the 10th grade as someone who would benefit from Pre-ETS. He was enrolled in a class that the school offers called Education for Employment to help him sort of get a handle on what he was going to need as he exited school and looked into career paths. And he was introduced through the school to the Pre-ETS counselor who provided monthly Pre-ETS workshops. But originally, we'd have thought this was not a very successful collaboration because the student was not engaged. He didn't seem too interested. He didn't participate much. He attended a few things. But as he reached graduation, and this is where that persistence and that patience and that what does success look like? It's different for everybody. The student suddenly realized, oh, maybe I should have paid a little bit more attention to that. And I have some transition coming up and I'm not sure what I need to do. So he reached back out to the ETR who coordinated. He still had an open PE case with DARS, even though he wasn't taking full advantage of it. And we started meeting again and identifying education and employment goals. And this time it was, because the student was requesting and the student was asking and he saw a need and he advocated for himself. So those seeds were planted, took a little while for them to grow. And we just needed to be consistent and an available presence there. So he knew that he could lean in when he was ready. There's a lot going on in high school, and sometimes you're really just not ready to focus on what comes after you leave high school. So now I'm working with this client. We continue to work together in a VR capacity. He is already successfully engaged in a welding internship, and we are getting him connected to the welders union and figuring out how to get him the training he needs, because he has undergone some vocational evaluations and welding is a realistic career for him. It's something he really wants to do. He wants to be in fine art welding. And so he's not employed at this time, but he is on his path to education to meet a really great career goal that he set while he worked with DARS. And Liz is going to take our next student.
The next student is also an example of a student who was identified a little bit later in high school due to where we were fine-tuning our communication. This young lady had her case manager and her transition plan read that she would be attending a 2 to 4 year college or university. Not really discussing her true passion, which was automotive and automotive mechanics and auto body. And so she had kind of dabbled a little bit into pre-ETS. We offer an education for employment class at our school. We also, like I said, have small groups of working with students who just might need to tweak resumes or may need some help with the college application process. So that's where she was receiving services. And it wasn't until the beginning of her senior year that she approached her IEP meeting and was like, wait a minute, I really want to go into automotive. I want to be automotive tech. I want to go into auto body. I don't have that experience, but this is something. So she was a young woman in a male dominated field and really didn't know how to go about that. So I immediately put her in touch with the DARS counselor, and she ended up participating in a vocational evaluation at Woodrow Wilson for auto body, and she ended up getting her certificate, which allowed her to have some different opportunities and to gain more experience. And then she received her auto body repair certificate through Northern Virginia Community College and is, competitively, gainfully, full-time employed at a local auto body shop. And she did that through that support with DARS that came as she was approaching graduation. Now, in a perfect world, we would have identified her earlier, but as we put in the pieces together, we were able to make this work for her. And it was just very important that information getting comes from, because this was, like I said, I didn't know her personally, and I was going off of what the case managers had said or what the transition plan had said that was generated. And the student input, the student voice really hadn't been heard until her senior year. So it was wonderful that things came together for her, but it just shows the importance that we also have to make sure that student desire, that student plan is upfront and communicated to everyone who's involved in the transition planning. And then our last example, Julie will go over.
All right, so this last student is currently enrolled in an out-of-state 4-year college, but when he came to DARS, he was originally connected through a CTI course, getting ready for college, a resource for teens with disabilities. So a little plug for some of the other great things that CTI does. He was connected to Northern Virginia Community College's Jumpstart program. That was something that was going on. Liz was referring students to, we were referring students to. It was a program our local community college system, I think, instituted during COVID for students to get some free credits under their belt to explore the Northern Virginia Community College system as an option when a lot of the four-year colleges were remote. So he was provided pre-ETS services. He was provided counseling on majors and minors in college. He had a real difficult time in high school. He felt like he wasn't a good student. He wasn't sure if college was gonna happen for him. He had a lot of doubts, and some of the things that DARS did was really focus on his self-advocacy piece, on really studying that career path and that career goal. He had an interest in law enforcement and forensics, but he just, with his grades and some of the issues he had been having at school, he just didn't know if he could see it through. So the student worked really well with his ETR and with the college and career team. They made sure that he had what he needed to apply to the schools. He also was an athlete, so he was looking at doing his sport in college and hoping to make that happen as well. So there were a lot of moving parts, and the school really made sure that he received all of the counseling and guidance and assistance that he needed to go to school. As he made his decisions, he applied for a number of different schools, and he had a couple of different places that wanted him to participate on their sports team, which he was just delighted with. We worked on how to get the accommodations at college that he was going to need so that he could access that curriculum in a way that was going to be successful for him. So we assisted him with answering some of those tough questions, filling out that paperwork, submitting it on time. And then we also, for him, we were able to provide some of the things that he needed to go to college. He needed some financial assistance to go to this out-of-state university. He didn't have the resources to purchase a laptop that he needed and some other things. And because he met financial eligibility for DARS program, we were able to assist him with funding a lot of the items he needed and just take some of that pressure of moving out of state and becoming a student and living independently. We provided him also with a neuropsychological assessment, which was the basis for all of those accommodation requests that he put in to his college. So, I'm in close contact with him. We talk a couple times a semester. He's moved into the RA position, so he's working while he's at school. He's successful on his sports team, and he calls me and he says, Mrs. Paradiso, I can't believe, he's like, I have straight A's. I'm doing great. College is an excellent fit for me. I didn't think this was going to happen. So he's well on his way to becoming a forensic scientist, which is his goal. And we're just so excited to see all those pieces come together so that he can be successful in a goal that he thought might have been a bit of a stretch. So we want to talk about some of the partnership examples outside of VR and the school that we're lucky enough to have here in Northern Virginia. An example of one of our great partnerships with an employment service organization, Service Source, is this Finding Your Futures class. So this is an example of an effective community partnership. They've been wonderful at developing this curriculum that helps go through all of those 5 core pre-ETS areas over the course of a number of weeks. And they've been flexible in when they hold the class, coming into the school during some of those free times that Liz has identified and blocks after school. So through this collaboration, Service Source has been able to customize a program that meets the specific needs of Liz's students. They focus on self-advocacy, on practical application of the acquired knowledge that they're getting in this class. And then they also have other services that we can refer students to that are geared towards social skills and other independence building skills that these transitioning students will need as they leave high school.
the way we've set it up at our high school is that we have a class that's called Strategies for Success. It is a class that focuses on getting students prepared for post-high school educational outcomes, more so like test taking, time management, executive functioning. Now, all of those skills can be directly generalized into the workplace as well, but it also helps because a lot of times students will say, well, I don't need those services. I'm going to be a-okay. I plan on doing this. I'm going to, you know, possibly go to college, community college to do this type of work. But what it does is it really opens up the students to understand that there might be more that they need to know before they go out there. And it acts kind of as another way that we can identify students, or that students can identify themselves and say, wow, I really didn't know too much about teamwork, or I didn't know that in an interview, this was kind of how I should be answering questions. And so it gives us an idea, while giving students valuable information that every student can benefit from. It also gives us and students another way to say, wait a minute, I may need some more support after high school, or I may need support before I graduate. And we have the sessions are spaced so that it's not drawn out too long for the students. It's anywhere from 9 to 11 sessions, which the sessions last about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. So can be tailored to a block schedule, every other day schedule, or even to, I know some schedules are about 50 to 55 minutes every class each day. So it really can be tailored to what different schools may have for student availability. And it really just gives students kind of like that baseline to work off of do I know who I am as a learner? And do I know what my strengths are going forward as an employee? What can I bring to the table? What do I need to work on? And so it has really fit wonderfully with our student school day, and then also targeting numerous students kind of at a time. We have a minimum of 5 students that need to participate, a maximum of I think around 12 per class. So it really is a small group, but we're able to get those students all together to kind of streamline the identification process.
So we've had a lot of examples of how this collaboration has been so successful, led to a lot of great student outcomes. And because of the successful collaboration, we're always looking forward to future opportunities and partnerships. We're very excited to be working with Liz and her school to develop a program called Community PERT, which stands for Post-Secondary Education Rehabilitation Transition. And this is going to be a partnership between DARS, so the VR program, the school, so Meridian High School, and our rehabilitation center in Virginia, the Wilson Workforce and Rehabilitation Center. This program is going to be multi-pronged, and it's going to offer multiple pre-employment transition services. It will assist students with, starting to explore the world of work and really get multiple different kinds of experiences. It's community-based, so it will be done here in the community in Northern Virginia. It will take place at our office in Fairfax. It'll take place at the school, and then it'll take place at different employment sites in the community. The 3 parts that this program will consist of is vocational interest exploration, which will be done by DARS staff. We'll be partnering with Liz and the school and doing assessments at the school, which will focus on work readiness skills, independent living skill instruction, and exploration using their facilities. And then we'll be bringing in work-based learning, or we'll be bringing in our employment service organizations to provide work-based learning experiences in the community. So those could be things such as job site tours, informational interviews, volunteer opportunities, based on what we've learned from their vocational interests. So this is something I think we're all pretty excited about. It's just a further example of how we can continue to collaborate, multiple agencies coming together, fill gaps, leverage all of our strengths together, and put together a program where we're all going to be providing a service that's going to help support students in their exploration of work.
Thank you so much, Liz, Tyler, and Julie, for sharing all of your expertise and experience and collaborating to provide these great transition opportunities for your students. I just wanted to provide a really quick overview. So it sounds like at the schools, Liz, you start with as the transition coordinators and the case managers and general education teachers work together to identify students and build that transition plan, including the student and the families, and helping find out their goals and who's responsible for what piece of that. And then when VR or vocational rehabilitation is brought in, Julie has assisted with identifying those service needs, providing those pre-employment transition services, and furthering that plan to develop what the VR plan and the individualized plan for employment moving forward. And then we can't forget that also the student and the family is also engaged and part of that process throughout. And transition starts at home. So both Julie and Liz mentioned some independent living skills, self-awareness, working through some of those things at home, like chores and conversations about future goals. All of that begins throughout the student's life, and of course in high school as well. This partnership, it sounds like you guys have developed a really great relationship, and thank you guys so much for sharing your experience. So some quick takeaways. It sounds like your initial relationship development is really important, developing that working relationship, your team development, and then also bringing in that family and the student for that team. So disseminating information to students and families, meeting and developing your plan of action. How often do you want to meet? What is your process? And how do you keep that engagement and that documentation and information straight? And then leveraging resources. So schools, we've shared a couple times, the student identification is key, beginning that transition plan. I think we've shared a little bit about potentially leveraging transportation, classroom access, and of course, scheduling for students' complicated schedules. And vocational rehabilitation can bring some additional funding, some planning assistance for life after high school, additional opportunities, and those continuing services for after leaving high school. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar about vocational rehabilitations in schools and developing those relationships for effective transition outcomes. You can find additional resources from CTI at centerontransitions.org, as well as get connected with us on any of these social media websites. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our presentation.